What's up, folks? Welcome into the maiden voyage of the Ira and Aslan show, Showtime with Schoffel. We'll figure out something. I think the plan for me, Ira, is that after enough times of doing this, you might have like a go-to line, such as Corey with his "quite frankly," then that'll be the name of the show. But in the meantime, it's going to be you and I talking about the football program. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you? Sounds good.
Good. Yeah, we'll be talking about some other things. I went back and looked at some of the questions. We even have some basketball questions. Folks, if you're not a member of warchant.com and watching this, it's okay. We'll listen to some of your comments, maybe integrate you into the show. But use the promo code FSU Spring 2019. I think there's one more day left on that promo. You'll get 6 bonus months and a $50 gift card or a gift certificate code, rather, you can use online at Garnet and Gold, the leading FSU fan apparel website. So be sure to join the family. Spring football is fully in gear. We're 2 days into it. And without further ado, I guess, let's go ahead, Ira, and let's get to the questions. First question comes from Rully FSU, Quiet Warrior. I apologize. I jumped the gun on that one. Let's go to Quiet Warrior's question first. Quiet Warrior asks, how big is FSU off-field staff, including analysts, recruiting staff, graphics folks, etc., compared to the other major programs, except Alabama? We know they have a small city for staff. Thanks, Ira.
They do have a small city first staff, maybe a big city first staff. Yeah, it's hard to actually get a clear number. We actually tried to do this about, I think it was 2 years ago. We actually put in public records request at Florida State, University of Florida, Alabama, Clemson, basically just about all the SEC and ACC schools to try to figure out, okay, how many support staff people does Clemson have versus Alabama and Florida State? And really hard to come up with that number because the problem is, they define them differently. They give them different titles. They have them part of different departments. So we got spreadsheets from some school. We got some schools who told us to take a hike. They weren't telling us anything. It was just really hard to compare apples to apples. But I would say this, Florida State, this is actually something I thought about doing. I need to do this at some point, is take like a team picture. Florida State's team picture, the one they do on team picture day, take those from like, say 1992 or 91 or maybe 87, the start of the dynasty, and then show the team pictures from every year till today, and you'll see the number of those white coaching shirts. I mean, like back in the day, there would be like the whole team, be like 100 players, and then like across the top, there might be like, 15, 20 guys, coaches and GAs and trainers. Then they would start going down the sides a little bit. Now in the team picture for Florida State, it's like 4 rows of guys in white shirts. The guys that you've never heard of, you don't know who they are. And, a lot of it is trainers and different athletic trainers and different people, but a lot of it is support staff. So Florida State's got a good size support staff. I think we've seen the numbers. FSU spent more money on football than Clemson did in the last numbers that were available. But, they're not as many as Alabama. They're not as many as some of these schools. And it may not be as many in that position, quality control guys as Clemson. Clemson has done some unique things that other schools haven't. They hired like a full-time recruiting video guy, and I know Florida State's dabbled in that, but I mean, Clemson really went intense in the social media for recruiting, things like that. They were kind of the first ones to jump into that. So that is definitely a growing arms race. Florida State's in the mix, probably like second tier. They're not quite at the top tier.
Right. They're not quite gold standard, right?
Not quite gold standard, which is, it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah. And to that point, too, I remember one night, Corey and I were talking just about alumni bases and how many boosters certain schools had. And I started looking at all these different universities to see how many boosters they had. And then I looked at staff directories. And I went and looked at A&M. And at least when it comes to staff directory on their official athletics website, like A&M, I would say probably close to double Florida State.
They're in that upper echelon for sure.
Yeah,
and that was one of the things that one of the reasons, Jimbo wanted to go there is they basically told him, hey, here's a blank checkbook. Yeah. And they're definitely in that mix.
All right, man. Let's get to the second question. This one comes from Warchant Knowles. Warchant Knowles asks you, Ira, or asks both of us, actually. How do you guys feel about the position switches on defense? He's got actually 2 questions in there. So let's start off with that. How do you feel so far after 2 practices, Ira, what you've seen on these position switches over on the defensive side of the ball?
So the main 3 ones are Hamza Nasruddin moving to linebacker from safety. Jaden Lars would be moving from linebacker to safety, which is probably what he came here to play. and then Levante Taylor moving from corner to nickelback/safety. I like those moves. There are a couple other guys as well. You noted that some of the guys are listed as defensive ends. Some of those bigger defensive ends, Malcolm Lamar and I think Chapman, are playing more inside than they are playing at defensive end. But the main ones are those three, and I like them. I really like Nasruddin, the linebacker, and I really like Jaden Woodby going back to safety. I like Levante Taylor going to nickelback or safety if he likes it.
Right.
When we talk to him, and we'll have a story on him in the next day or so. But he didn't sound like this was the greatest decision of all time. He basically said that they looked at him because he played some nickelback earlier in his career, and the coach said, we looked back at that and you made a lot of plays, more than you can at corner. Would you be interested? Would you try it in the spring? And he said he would try it. I think he's going to have a lot of success there this spring for him to really embrace it. But at the end of the day, they're trying to get the best 11 players on the field. And if Levante Taylor is one of your 4 best DBs, but you're not sure he's one of your best 2 corners, then I think it makes a lot of sense. I like him. I mean, what do you think?
I do like Hamza moving down to linebacker. I kind of wanted to see Woodby stay at linebacker. Again, I don't know what they're trying to do with the fronts now, if they're going to try to go to a true 3-4 or stay at a 4-3, but I just felt like Woodby gave you versatility where he could, be the star linebacker, but that gives you sort of more responsibilities on the back end and coverage. I thought he could probably blend those well. I don't know about making him like a true safety, but it probably opens up his skill set a little bit better. I mean, I'll trust their judgment on that. Hamza's intriguing though. I felt like Hamza was a really intriguing safety sort of prospect, just the way his size was. And I remember, I'll always remember this asking Harlan, I think it was the week before, the week of the Miami game, just about, or maybe it was after the Miami game, but there was a game where I think it was probably the Miami game where Kyle Myers, poor guy, just kept getting beat on the goal line. And it felt like, why don't you just put Hamza out there to cover a guy? He's got the size to match up with somebody, like in man coverage in a small, tight area, right? Like you don't need to make Hamza go in man coverage when opposing team's on the 40-yard line, but when they're on the 5, sure. And I think that very game, he got beat, man coverage, just straight up off the line. You're like, well, all right, maybe the coverage is not the strongest part of his game. It's being more aggressive and just finding the ball carrier and punishing them. So more excited about Hamza moving into the box. I think Woodby will be a success pretty much wherever he ends up, but I thought maybe he would be more valuable to the team at this current point at the linebacker spot. And then Levante, we'll see how that goes.
Well, with Hamza, I mean, he's so physical, and so you'd love to have him up there, and I think he's a guy that can make plays. The other side of it, as far as Woodby goes, it's hard to judge also because he hasn't done as much. I don't know why he's limited or what's going on with him. Maybe we can ask Willie on Friday, but I haven't seen him as much in the team stuff as the other safeties. So haven't got a great feel for how he'll do back there, but he certainly, like you said, I think he could put him anywhere.
All right, let's get to our next question. This one comes from Noel Freak 85. He's got 2 questions, or 3. 2 for you, 1 for me, I guess. Ira, I hope it's not anywhere on the horizon, but do you think Leonard Hamilton will name one of his assistants as a head coach in waiting when he does decide to hang it up, or is that just going to be left up to whoever becomes athletic director, president in 2029? Little humor there, everybody. It's a little joke.
That's a good question. I don't know that Leonard's going to have the ability to name a head coach in waiting. I mean, Bobby Bowden didn't really get to name a head coach in waiting. They did that for him. But I think there's some great options on that staff. There's no question. And it would be cool if they could keep those guys together, if possible. They have 3 assistant coaches: Stan Jones, who's been with Leonard going back to the University of Miami days. Then the 2 younger guys, Dennis Gates, who actually played at Cal, but was a GA here briefly early when he first got into coaching, then left, became a full-time coach. He came back. He's been very successful. He's a very good recruiter and a non-floor coach. He's the one that brought in, I think he was the one that brought in Jonathan Isaac mostly. He also brought in Kevin Gelly. He's been very active as a recruiter and on the court coach. And then Charlton Young's probably been the top recruiter. Charlton Young may be, in my money, one of the top 2 or 3 recruiters in the country. I mean, he got them Dwayne Bacon. He is just a super, very good recruiter. He's the one that had them in the mix with Anthony Edwards and some of these guys. And he's also a good coach. So I think that staff is really good. If there's a way, if one of them could take over and the rest of them stayed, that would be great. As far as who it would be, it's hard to say. Stan Jones obviously has the coaching chops. He's been not a head coach, but he's been the right-hand man for so many years. But he hasn't. He's been interviewed for head coaching jobs, and for one reason or another, hasn't gotten them. So I don't know if maybe if FSU would feel like he's marketable enough. Maybe a younger guy. He's in that window where it's like if you're not a hot young coach, a lot of these administrations don't want to take a chance. So we'll see. I don't know that he could pick one. I don't know if Leonard could pick one though. I think he'd have a hard time picking one, and then how it would all work out. But it would be cool if they could stay together because they really got something good going.
Definitely, man. I agree. Yeah, it's like picking your favorite child, right? Who deserves it more? Noah Freaky 85 asked me, Aslan, if Willie Taggart wins a championship, will you get a tattoo of the new logo? Absolutely not. That's because we know that the logo is so intricate, it's hard to embroider.
But the new one's fine. You can do it with the new one, Aslan. The old one was too intricate.
Yeah, well, still, with all the needlework you have to do on a tattoo, the shade and the color. I watch Ink Master on Spike TV. I've seen too many talented people goof up too many times to put my faith in getting that tattooed on my body. I don't have any tattoos, though, so that's not me being too picky on the tattoo, or the logo, rather. Next question, Ira, comes from ATL082. ATL082 asks you, Ira, Aslan, you're his phone a friend on Wake Up War Chant when it comes to detailed questions about Florida State or NCAA stuff in general. Who would be your phone a friend if you hosted a radio show or podcast? Do you even need one?
It depends on the question. If it was a historical Florida State question, yeah, I would need a lot because my knowledge of Florida State athletics really goes back to when I first started covering them. Unlike Corey, unlike yourself, I didn't grow up going to Florida State games. My family wasn't into college sports at all. They were from a bunch of Yankees from the Northeast. So not New York Yankees, but from the Northeast. If anything historical, Corey Clark's my guy. I mean, he knows. He's got one of those Jimbo minds that remembers every detail from every team, every game that he's ever been to. And then if it was something that was more about kind of how things got the way they are at Florida State, it would be Jerry Kutz at Seminole Boosters, who founded the Osceola, because Jerry knows where all the bodies are. I mean, Jerry's been here from back in the day. So those would be my two choices. You get to pick like 2 or 3 options, don't you?
Right, yeah. Depending on the expertise or whatever. So you got yourself covered. By the way, when's part 3 dropping of your sit down with Eugene and Jerry?
Man, I may go up tonight. It's a mysterious question. I get a lot of questions about that. Really, to be honest with you, we got behind and spring football started, but it's pretty much written. It could be tonight. It could be tonight. I'm definitely gonna force myself to put it out the next day or two.
Oh, don't do that. People have just been inquiring. I just want to let those folks know that it hasn't left your mind. You realize that they're waiting on that.
And it's gonna be focused on College Town and what that does, the purpose of it, and how it's done so far.
All right. He also asks a football-related question. ATL082 says, I know you're only able to see 2 practices, and we have a long way to go, but do you see anything that is causing you to have more or less optimism going into next season, Ira?
You'd probably say the same thing. I think you always feel optimistic at this time of year. Everybody on every campus. You'd have to be in really bad shape for people to go out to a spring football practice and be like, oh, no, what are we going to do? Right. I think there's reasons to be optimistic. And honestly, sometimes you look at them, you look at the talent at different positions, and you're like, man, how did this team win only 5 games last year? And, I think that's – and so you say, well, man, they really – should have done better than they did. And, you think about how they lost it, some of those games where they weren't even competitive. It doesn't make any sense. Right now, I think the attitudes are really good. Somebody made a comment to me that, everybody's optimistic in the spring and everybody's upbeat in the spring. But sometimes if you're coming off a 5-17 season, you wonder how the guys are going to be. But they do seem to be engaged. I think watching the communication, one thing I've liked was watching the communication from players. Like the other day when we were watching 11-on-11, DJ Matthews and I think Tamarian Terry lined up next to the sideline we were standing on, and they both lined up on the line of scrimmage, which was, again, last year where they would cover up each other and cause plays to be called back. As soon as they got there, DJ Matthews looked over at Tamarian, who was outside of him. He's like, get back. And Tamarian kind of like stepped back like a smidge, and DJ's like, no, get back. And so Tamarian got back off the line. That's a good sign that there is some guys taking ownership and not just going out there and letting other people mess up. So, it's a small thing, but I do think they seem engaged. They seemed they're saying the right things, but I think you're seeing some evidence of it in what we've seen now. Would you agree or no?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I remember, I think on Wednesday, on day 2, we were out there during linebacker drills. They were doing this thing around like a pass rush drill, or maybe on pump block, where they're running around a hula hoop and they have to, stay low and go around the edge. And one of the linebackers, I don't know what they were trying to accomplish, but apparently he didn't have a good rep, and he was kind of just, jogging off afterwards. And you could hear people in the line like, hey, no, like, do it again. That rep wasn't good. Like, Raymond wouldn't even have to say anything. The guy's in line, and he was an upperclassman linebacker too, so it wasn't like a freshman was being corrected by, guys that were older than him. It was one of his peers. Was like, hey, nah, man, that's not a good rep. That's not going to win. Like, get back in line, do it again. And then he got back there, and everybody started, like, coaching him up and clapping it up. So, I mean, to that point, the attitudes obviously do seem to be, everyone's listening, everyone's engaged, everyone's excited. So, and I know that might be a low bar to set, but after what happened last season and all the things that have, kind of undergone since then, I mean, they'd come out there and maybe not be totally excited even on day 2. So I'll take that as an encouraging sign.
Well, for sure, because I mean, you think back to what we were hearing at the end of last season, the way they were playing, in the game where Willie basically said that they quit, and you'd hear things that maybe guys weren't all bought in with his staff, and there was some dissension going on in the back, which happens when you lose a lot of football games. Yeah. The fact that it looks like right now anyway, that they're on board with each other. It's certainly a positive. It could be a lot worse.
All right, next question comes from Garnett76. The vibe about Briles seems to be that he's fairly quiet and in control. When it comes to Willie, the vibe seems to be that he's too laid back and not animated enough. Is this just because fans were used to that Tasmanian devil that preceded him and think that's the way a head coach should be? Or is it just endless nitpicking until we get until we can produce a better record? I can't see how players can perform at their best when their face masks are covered in their coach's spittle, and that may not get you a lot of favorable calls from the refs either.
That's a good question. I mean, perceptions are always interesting. Leonard Hamilton for years has gotten grief from fans that he doesn't look like he's, he doesn't change his expression. He doesn't get too animated.
The 12 faces of Leonard Hamilton.
Yeah.
Like Leonard Hamilton pensive, Leonard happy, angry. Yeah.
And during games, sometimes they'll watch and things are going poorly, and Leonard's not panicking or freaking out, and people perceive that as he's not engaged or doesn't have an answer. That was the kind of things you would hear people say. So really, it depends on how you view that. Is totally based on what you perceive that person to be. Like Kendall Briles being quiet. I mean, Kendall Briles has been way more quiet than Willie Taggart. I mean, from what I've seen in practice. I mean, Willie, there will be times. I mean, the other day, Wednesday, they were doing 11 on 11, and one of his pet peeves, it's probably a safety issue, but the guys on the sideline that aren't playing at 11 on 11 always kind of start creeping onto the field and, kind of getting into the way a little bit. And he'll tell them, guys, back up. And then about 3 minutes later, they start creeping on again. And he turned over. He's like, guys, I'm not going to say it again. Back the blank up. And so, I mean, he's got that. He does that. And I just think that on the sideline, especially when things went poorly or there were crisis type situations, the reviews and things like that, I think that is probably where the perception really came from with Willie, that he wasn't acting quick enough. He wasn't making quick enough decisions. But as far as like you're quiet or quiet or loud, I honestly think that's totally based on whether or not people think you're doing a good job. I mean, you'll have leaders that are quiet and leaders who are loud. And if they're good, if they're productive, then it's a positive in either way. The other thing I would say is, with Briles, we just don't know. I mean, like nobody knows what he's going to be. Yep. But people are hopeful. So he's going to get the benefit of the doubt right now. And because Willie's 5-7, somebody made the comment to me the other day, this whole thing with the David Kelly and the 10 coaches, 9 coaches and all that, everything looks worse because you were 5-7 last year. If they had gone 9-3, it wouldn't be quite as big a deal.
Well, I mean, my point to that sort of is, coming off, I've thought Jimbo Fisher was a really good head football coach for a college football program. So his sort of style, which rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, I wasn't around in a very close way. I was from a distance because I wasn't here in Tallahassee at that point. I thought that was kind of the archetype of what you want to have a coach to be. So then when Willie comes in with his style, it sort of, to me, just seemed like a little bit of too much of a drastic change one way. Kind of, we always seem to, whether it's politics or whatever in life, we always sway, and we never kind of stay in the middle of things. My thing with Kendall Briles, like admiring the fact that he is just kind of laid back and on the side, just making things happen, is that his record is so proven. Like it's worked in 3 different places over the last 8 years that like I have much more confidence in his ability because he's not coming off a 5-7 season. I was maybe a little skeptical, obviously, about because the difference between Jimbo and Willie's personalities. But why I'm more receptive or open to feeling confident about the way Kendall does things, that first he's just a coordinator. But I mean, it was just crazy because I remember looking around like, where's Kendall Browse? And I think Corey was like, he's on the sideline signaling in the plays. And just the way he's just sitting there, he's just analyzing everything. Is just like, you just feel like he's totally in control, knows what he wants to see, is fine with it. And there wasn't, like, he's making the mental notes and he's going to coach them off the field.
Well, and you feel that way because he's had success and you haven't seen him fail here.
Exactly. And
if he looked like that and they're struggling, you're like, what the hell is that guy doing?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But well, he needs to get in people's face and make sure they hear him and know what he's saying. Like, but for right now, people want Aslan to be optimistic Aslan. So, I mean, that's how I'm looking at him. That's my optimism on things. So, let's go to the next question here. Ira, comes from Rick Talley 21. He says, are the transfer and graduate quarterbacks being scared off due to their fear of playing behind this offensive line?
I don't think so. I think it's their concern about the program in general. I don't think it's just the offensive line. I think the offensive lines can be fixed. It probably doesn't help, but I don't think that's the whole thing. I mean, I think, look, Florida State, there's a reason they weren't a top 15 class or top 10 class. I mean, this is seen right now as a program that is had a 7-6 season followed by a 5-7 season. And you've got coaches around the country telling these kids, man, Willie Taggart's not going to be there in a year or two. That place is going down. It's not going up. It was easy for Willie to sell hope and excitement. I think if this was this time last year, I think you probably would have had more success getting guys in, even the transfers, because you're selling hope. After what people saw last year, I just think they're going to have a hard time getting traction. And, that's the downside to having a bad first year. And so I think that's it as much as anything. But, if you have a good year this year, now you can, again, you get something to sell again. And that's why this year, to me, is really going to make or break his whole tenure, just because they have to have a good enough year that they can sell going into the next recruiting season. Because Florida State can't be you can't be an 18 or 20 recruiting class type of school to be where they want to be.
Right. And to your point, the Florida State brand obviously carries from C to C, but I think, like a guy like Bobby Bowden, obviously his reputation preceded himself. He had a cachet of trophies and rings to prove himself. When Jimbo first came in, it was the fact that he worked for Nick Saban. Then he finally got a ring and he recruited at a really high level. A lot of those guys didn't pan out, but he still was up there. I don't know like what Willie's brand is when it comes to like what people perceive of him, a kid in Texas or a kid in Virginia, because they knew what Bobby Bowden was. They knew who Jimbo Fisher was. I think Willie was at the group of 5 level, and then he was at Oregon for 1 year, so he's practically off the side of the earth when it comes to kids that are from Georgia or Tennessee or even in Florida. So I think that's more of it than the fact that people are like look at the depth chart and they're like, well, you know what, Landon Dickerson's not really had a good time of staying off the injury bug, and the center's a bit light. I don't know how much of that goes into figuring out where you're going to transfer to. I think it's brand equity and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't help that your quarterbacks have been getting scraped off the grass for the last 2 years, 3 years. But yeah, I don't think that's the primary problem.
Yeah. All right, here we go. This is going to be a bunch of questions from one guy. His name is Poopin' Boogers, but I promise it's a high-quality question, Ira. Which of the 2018 wide receivers will make the biggest impact? Guys like Warren Thompson, Trayshawn Harrison, Jordan Young, DeMarcus Adams, Keyshawn Helton. Which one of those guys do you think makes the biggest impact?
Man, that's a good question. I was thinking Trayshawn Harrison, Keyshawn Helton, Warren Thompson right behind them, and then Jordan Young. You were bullish on Jordan Young.
Yeah.
I wasn't so sure, but I've been impressed with him this week. He's really showed when he gets the ball in his hands. I mean, he's impressive. So I think it's a tough call. My guess would be, Helton. It seems like Helton's running more with the ones, at least when they first go out there, from what I saw. So I think they like him a lot, and he's a tough kid. I just don't know that Warren Thompson's not going to beat out Tamarian Terry. I just don't know how many reps he's going to get. Jordan Young will probably get in the mix of that group. That I'd go with Keyshawn Helton. I think.
Yeah.
Just because I think he's going to be on the field more. I think.
Yeah, I'm a little his size. I still find it, can he hold up 13 games, and at what point does he get scouted? Things like that. I think Jordan Young's just size, his just measurables kind of outweigh what Keyshawn can bring. But I'd probably say I'd say Keyshawn, and then I'd say Jordan Young, and then Trayshawn. I'd probably have three, and then Warren Thompson in the fourth spot there in terms of impact. I am interested to see how, because I don't know, like Trayshawn Harrison to me, I think best case he falls somewhere in between like Rashad and Travis Rudolph. Best case. And I'm not even saying that for 2019, but I think maybe career wise. But he could arguably, if he ends up on the level of Travis Rudolph or just below Travis Rudolph, how will people look at him? Because he's a guy that David Kelly said that we had him on our board as the number one athlete in the entire country. And I know a lot of folks have high expectations for him, so I wonder how fans will sort of assess his career if he doesn't, if he's not closer to Rashad than Travis, for instance. So.
I'm gonna go with Keyshawn or Trayshawn. I'm gonna go one of the Shawns. Yeah. I don't know if you know this or not. Like in horse racing, they'll have coupled entries. They'll have entries where it's if their same trainer works with two different horses, they'll put them together as 1 and 1A. Oh, and if you bet on number one, and either one of them comes in, you win. So I'm going to go with the Shawns. I'm going to call them a coupled entry. And if either of the Shawns gets it, that's who I'm going with.
All right. The next question was defensive tackles seems solid. Durden, Cooper, Marvin. But how are the defensive ends going to shake out besides Kando and Robinson? Who else will we see on the field? Peters, etc. rather. Xavier Peters. Yeah, defensive end. That's a interesting thing because we don't even really know what they're going to run base, right? Right, Ira? Is it going to be 4-3 or is it going to be 3-4?
Yeah, we don't know. They've shown a little bit of both in practice. You asked Willie about it. He didn't really answer your question. I think they've got personnel wise. I like the possibilities of a 3-4. So we'll have to see. But if we're talking about as a 4-3 or just traditional pass rushers, I like Xavier Peters. I like Dennis Briggs. I don't know if either of them is, they haven't really played much. They each got on the field briefly last year, but got those red shirts where if you only play in a couple games, you can still red shirt. I think they both showed potential, but I don't know if they're every down guys. And the problem we have with Janarius and Kando is they just, neither one of them has been very consistent. So it's hard to say. Kando's got all the talent in the world, but it's hard to say, it's definitely going to happen because it hasn't happened yet. And I know he's had some injuries, but that to me is the big question on defense. I think linebacker, with the moves they've made and guys they've got coming in and everything, I think linebacker is going to end up being okay, better than it was last year. Defensive end to me is a big question, and that's really going to be a huge question because I agree with him. The defensive tackles I think are have a chance to be outstanding.
Yeah. And then his last question almost sort of dovetails into what you were talking about there, Ira, was basically what you think about the linebacker position. Who's going to flash, or who do you see helping out besides besides D-Jack being sort of the leader of that group? Who else at the linebacker spot do you think will emerge?
I like they've got some bigger guys there. I like Leonard Warner came on late last year. I like what he did in the middle when they moved him last year and moved D-Jack to the outside. I like those two guys being out there. They're bigger, stronger. Warner's been working with the first team this week, or at least early in the week. Dontavius was running with the twos. I'm guessing that's a result of something that happened between the end of the last season and today, something like either, what he did in the chase or academics. This time of year, a lot of times depth charts are dependent on how guys are doing away from the football field. So I'm sure that'll kind of work itself out. I expect Dontavius to be a starter, but maybe he goes outside, Warner in the middle, and then you talk about Hamza Nasruddin maybe at the other linebacker spot. I think you've got a chance to be much more physical. And DeKalin Brooks, maybe he ends up being that star guy. We'll see. But I just think they have a chance to be much more physical and beefier than they were last year, which was, it wasn't just their lack of size. They also didn't fit their run really well. They didn't hit their run fits, but they are more physical. So I think that group can be a lot better. Yeah. And then Jaleel McRae looks pretty good. They've got some options now. Yeah,
they're throwing bodies at the problem. They're going to the Corey Clark school of problem solving, throwing bodies at the issue. Vicris Ram asks you, Ira, what is your take on special teams play? There's always got to be one of these guys, right? I always ask my special teams. Will there be more fair catch calls to solidify field position? Will there be a kicker competition this year Thoughts on reducing penalties on special teams?
I do think that you've already seen some signs, I think, of a better emphasis on special teams. I mean, I think some of the stuff we've seen Snyder doing out there looks good. But then again, was it this time last year when we were all praising them for holding a ball in their hand and catching a punt with the other hand,
Yeah.
and we were like, these guys have invented special teams. This is awesome. And then they couldn't catch a punt.
Well, they could catch a punt. They just couldn't. They couldn't field kickoffs properly. They couldn't get on the field properly.
Yeah. Well, and they let some punts roll.
Couldn't block them.
Yeah. So I think it's got to get better. I mean, that is literally a position where it can't be worse. And if the things we talked about earlier, guys holding each other accountable, that would help as well. I think that I think Mark Snyder's a better coach than Alonzo Hampton. I think those guys are going to be better coached. As far as whether they fair catch or return them, that was the thing. I think last year, Willie just seemed to have this perception, especially on kickoffs, that because of the athletes Florida State has, they're just always at a chance to break off a long return. And there really aren't that many great. I mean, it's just there's so many good athletes on special teams now. I'll get off this real quick, but just one time when everybody talks about Tyrell Buckley's fake fair catch against Syracuse, where he faked for a fair catch and then took it off and ran for a touchdown. When Leon Washington was here, I don't know if you remember this, but I went up and watched. I took him up there to show. He had never heard of it. So I said, let's go up in the film room and watch it. So they did. They set Campo set us up in there where we could watch it. And I want to get Leon's take on T-Buck's great return. And we watched it, and he sat there quietly, and then finally he goes, man, they had a lot of slow teams on that cover, slow guys on that coverage unit. and you watch it, it really was. Back then, people didn't put their best athletes on special teams. Well, now everybody does. I mean, that was like revolutionary when Jimbo got here, and he had the whole starting defense on kick coverage, and we're like, what's he doing?
Right.
But that's what people do now. They put great athletes out there, and so I just don't know how many great returns you're going to get. So you got to make good decisions back there. I think the guys we saw returning punts the other day were I think it was DJ. DJ was one of them. You'd expect him to be the starter. I think Keyshawn Helton was one, and Raymond Woody the third. He was actually returning punts. I'm not saying those are going to be the other two main guys, but those guys are working there. They're all good athletes, but it's hard to say. As far as the kicker competition goes, Mark Snyder did make that comment. I assume Ricky Aguayo will be the guy, but they did sign the Fitzgerald kid from Georgia, who's supposed to have a big leg. And
Colquitt County represent.
Mark Snyder made the comment at the signing day affair that he could be the kicker sooner than anybody expects. So that guy won't be here till the summer, though. So we'll see. I mean, it's possible, but you would assume a 4-year starter, Ricky Aguayo, is going to keep the job.
Yeah. All right, Captain D _63, 5-star Schoffel. What are the most important improvements does the football team need to make in the spring and going forward besides the offensive line to get back to 11 and 12-plus winning seasons? That's an easy one, Ira. Offered free of charge, too.
11 or 12 wins, huh?
Yeah. Most important improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say offensive line. Yeah, I mean, man, it's across the board. If you want to get that's the thing. Like when you watch the playoff games, talent's big. When you watch those playoff games, I mean, I think that was the most, it just really hit home how far Florida State has to go. And it is kind of amazing how quickly it happens. But, I just don't think Florida State, I mean, certainly not on the offensive line. Last season, certainly not at linebacker. Probably not in the secondary. Certainly not safety. Probably not certainly not a quarterback. I mean, those are, huge areas where you're not at the level those other teams are. So there's a lot of things they got to do. I don't know if James Blackman is a 12-win quarterback. We'll have to see. Maybe if everything else is going really well around him, he's still not the most accurate quarterback you're ever going to see. He throws a great deep ball, but he's not super accurate. And then, I think you've got really good running backs. I think you've got a lot of talent at wide receiver. I think you have a lot of talent in the secondary. I think you got a ton of talent defensive tackle. But I think, your pass rushers have to get better. Linebackers have to prove they're better. And quarterback play has to get a lot better. I mean, you watch, again, any of those bowl games, the late bowl games, all those teams that played well and won had really good quarterbacks. They don't have to be like first-round pick quarterbacks. They're really good college quarterbacks. And I just don't think FSU's had really good quarterback play the last couple of years, and I don't know that it will this year. I mean, I think Blackman's way better than anybody else they have, and I think he might have been better than DeAndre, even if DeAndre stayed. But I don't know if we're going to at the end of the season or next season say, yeah, James Blackman's in that upper echelon of college quarterbacks. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll see, man. I think I don't know if Kendall and Willie just need to get the right kind of quarterback they want, but I mean, it's hard to get those guys. And I mean, to your point, I think everyone kind of looked at Alabama and would be like, well, look who they're winning national championships with, or who LSU won their national championships with. But I mean, even Nick Saban now with Tua, like, you need a really elite top shelf quarterback to make everything go. I don't know if they have one of those guys on roster, but I do feel good about James Blackman. To your point, like, yeah, I don't think he's ever going to complete 10 passes in a row, whether it's on a Saturday or on a practice field. But I still just think that there's just a way about him. I don't think he's got some sort of magical aura. But I really admire what he did in 2017, just being thrust into that. And I know he looked really bad in a lot of games, but there was he had really good spurts in the second half against teams like Miami and NC State, even Louisville, despite that fumble. And he looked good closing the season out against, yes, lesser competition. But I think, if he's got the support of the coaching staff and they know he's the starting quarterback, I think the rest of that team will pick him up. Marvin Wilson talked about how if there's anything James Blackman wants, I got him. That counts for something. Now, if they keep losing, it won't, but I got faith in him.
No, I agree with you there. He does have some intangibles that are off the charts, which makes up probably for some lack of accuracy.
It was crazy to me the other day. I saw them running down the field to go to a different station and do a different drill, and James Blackman's running out front and everybody's following him. And it just struck me as like a weird, what James Blackman had to do for 15 weeks last year. Every drill, like, chase behind DeAndre Francois and run to the next station. Like, Francois was the guy that was leading the most important position of your entire team, and guys were like literally chasing, running behind him, like, lead us to the next drill. And there's something I think about James Blackman being that guy now that's going to have an overall benefit to the team. So,
well, I thought, and we can move on, but I thought the quote from Cam Akers that I wrote about in the story, was in the story I posted earlier today, is when he talked about being night and day, the offense. I don't know, it might have been a little subtle, at least an endorsement to James,
right?
About how everybody's on the same page. And Cam always seemed like a guy that liked James Blackman a lot. I'm not saying he didn't like DeAndre. He actually defended DeAndre sometimes on social media. I think you might be right on that. I mean, he does have a magnetic personality, and those guys love him, no question.
Last question from Captain D63 is, secondly, there are times where we take really bad shots for an experienced basketball team. Do you think this will hurt us from going far into the tournament and possibly the Final Four? Nope, man, we're going there. Book the tickets, Minneapolis. We'll see you there.
That actually was my one complaint about the game the other night against Virginia Tech. I thought that was one of the rare times. I don't think that's been a problem throughout the season. I mean, occasionally, every team. I mean, look, you hyper-focus on your team. Every team takes bad shots. I mean, every team, Duke takes bad shots. Carolina takes bad shots. But I thought in that game there were a lot of them. There was a lot of guys trying to deliver the dagger. That's why I felt like once they got the lead and they were kind of trying to put Virginia Tech away, they got up by 6. I think they were up by 6 and had a chance to go up by 8, missed a layup.
Yeah.
And after that, it was like they kept trying to hit the 3 that would put Virginia Tech away instead of just playing team basketball, playing what they do. But I think that might have been partly because of senior night, partly because there was a lot in that game. They fought so back to get back in it, some emotions. But that can be a concern. But I think they're going to be fine, especially in tournament time. I think this team is mature enough that that's not going to be what does them in.
Yeah, their head was in the right place. I mean, they're trying to deliver the dagger, home crowd, put them out of it. I can appreciate that. And also, I mean, there was a couple times there when there was like a 3-possession sequence where they were taking bad shots one after another with 16, 17 seconds left on the shot clock. And I remember Ham was just like, calm down, slow it down, figure out, get a better shot. So they're totally cognizant of it. And listen, when you do take bad shots in crunch time of a game against a top 15 opponent, but you're still able to win,
I agree.
Feels pretty good. All right, this comes from FSU 91. Ira, I'm going to be in Tallahassee for the first time in 9 years in a few weeks. I want to see if I could get hired on a one-day contract to cover practice on Wednesday, March 27th. We know that Corey doesn't want to be out there early, so I can just take his press pass for the day. I live in Montana. I just haven't made it back to my old stomping grounds in a while. Help a brother out.
he's going to come and do the definitive roster breakdown.
Yes, yes.
He's going to come to practice.
Get a big chart, whiteboard, grease board, writing everything down.
For non-War Chant subscribers, if you're on our message boards, FSU 91 is the guy that he is nailing down that roster. He knows every guy who's on scholarship at every position and always trying to figure out what the numbers look like and how many guys they can sign. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see, man. They're a little sticklerish about who comes out to practice. But I think, from what I remember, I think he actually used to work at the university.
Yeah.
So if he's got some other contacts, maybe try those. Maybe it could be the fallback plan.
I'll hand him my tripod. He can just walk in with the tripod.
Your assistant.
Be my intern, exactly. Yeah. Here we go. We got No-Blooded 93. We're winding down. A few more questions left here. No-Blooded 93 asks Ira, what are your thoughts on Anthony Baselli? Will he be able to make an impact?
Well, I think it's great that he's back out. Of course, for people that don't remember, Anthony Baselli was pretty highly recruited, not super highly recruited, but I mean, his dad's Tony Baselli. Signed with Florida State a couple years ago, left the team before last season, but stayed in town, stayed in school, came out for walk-on tryouts, and has been out there at practice. He is very undersized right now. He wasn't, when he got here, he wasn't a guy you'd say, okay, that guy's ready to go play Division I college football physically. But I think he's a talented kid and he comes from great bloodlines. And now that he's been away from the game for a year, yeah, I mean, he's definitely undersized. So I think, man, if he really wants it and works at it, maybe he's a guy in a year or so that can contribute. I have a hard time. I mean, I don't know what you think, but I have a hard time based on what we saw looking at him physically that, oh yeah, he's going to be helping in 2019.
Of all the things I'll humor, with optimism and hope and I always talk about the romanticism of football is dead. It's become such a big business. I want to believe in this. Like, I think it's so awesome because to walk away from a scholarship and then to come back and have to walk on, and everyone's like, well, he doesn't need the scholarship. He can afford it. That's besides the point. It's just you're on a different class. I mean, like in the social structure of a football team, if you're a walk-on, I mean, like, yeah, you're not getting all the team issued gear, and sometimes you're not sitting with the team at meals and things like that. So for him to come back and do it the hard way, I think is super cool. And it's a position of real big need. It's got a new offensive line coach. It was a huge part of the reason why the program was 5-7 last year. Like, I want to dream a little dream. Like, I don't think he'll upend Bavion Johnson, but when you think about it, the guy in front of him immediately is Christian Meadows. I don't even think Meadows ever played center in high school. I know for sure he wasn't taking any snaps last year. And then the guy in front of both of them is a guy who, quite frankly, was supposed to be the starting center, but couldn't even get down the most basic duty of that job, which is snapping the ball. And that's why he wasn't playing in 2018. So, I mean, but Anthony Baselli's played football. I think a guy, I joked on the message boards, hope I didn't offend anybody. I'm like, once a fat boy, always a fat boy. I think a guy like him can probably put 20 pounds on between now and kickoff, and it's not going to be, terribly jarring to him to get used to that. So I think we might see him thrust into a spot. Maybe somebody hurts an ankle or they got to get their hand rewrapped or something. And I think he might end up going out there and doing an all right job. I'm going to believe in it, Ira. I'm believing in it, man.
You got me sold. I would say this, and you can be undersized at center without question. And there are things they can do to help you out there. But I would say from a story perspective, you're no doubt. I mean, and to the point you were making about walk-ons and scholarship guys, it is a complete different class level. And in terms of what you get, I remember talking to guys like receivers who've been put on scholarship who would say, yeah, when you're a walk-on, you go pick up the used gloves for practice. Like the trainers or the managers will give you the gloves that have already been used by the scholarship guys. They might have a hole in them or something, and that's the gloves you use. But when you go on scholarship, it's all of a sudden you get all the first class, top of the line stuff. So it is a big deal to come back, and everybody knows you're not a scholarship guy anymore. So it is impressive, and it would be a great story. So yeah, you sold me a little bit.
Dream a little dream, Ira.
You sold me a little bit.
Dream a little dream.
Feel a little warm in here.
No Blooded 93 also asks, has Kendall Browse spoke about a grad transfer quarterback since Nick Starkel is out of the picture? I'll answer that one for you, Ira. We haven't spoke to Kendall Browse.
Yeah.
And then also he asked, will you guys do something for the spring game? I'm assuming he means something along the lines of that meet and greet we did last year up in the Champions Club. I would say be on the lookout, probably, maybe, possibly.
Where I don't think it's going to be in the Champions Club. I think there's a conflict. I think they have some event. I know some event that they have scheduled, probably trying to make more money than we're going to provide for them. But that was a great event last year. I'm sure Gene's going to try to do something, but I don't think it's going to be the Names Club, at least last I heard. And as far as grad transfer quarterbacks, yeah, like you said, we haven't talked to Kendall. He wouldn't be able to discuss them anyway because they're like recruits. The coaches can't talk about recruits. I would think they're still on the hunt. And I do think that at the end of the spring, Coach Henshaw, in our Henshaw's House feature that we did a week or two ago about the whole transfer process, he mentioned that, look, I mean, there may be a lot of guys out there who are going to transfer at the end of the spring that you don't even know about right now, that they're not in the transfer portal yet because they want to see how spring practice goes. And then if they lose the job or if they get, or if something happens, a coaching change, whatever, there may be guys that graduate transfers that transfer at the end of the spring and then show up at a new school, 2 weeks later. So because they haven't gotten anybody yet, doesn't mean they're not going to get anybody. We just don't know anybody definitively who it's going to be.
Smack 'em. Your first impressions of the overall physical strength of the team. Does it seem on the surface to have improved, in other words? I don't know. We're not arm wrestling them. I will say that Landon Dickerson to me looks like he is bigger and stronger than he was last year. More, I don't know. I mean, he looks like a mountain of a man. We saw the weight total gain by a guy like Mike Arnold. Is it good weight? Is it bad weight? I don't know. He got some pretty good praise, and he got a couple attaboys out of Randy Clements the other day. I guess that's kind of to be determined. It's only 2 days of practice. I really can't speak for the overall strength of the team, but we'll know soon enough, I assume.
How many guys on the team do you think you could beat in arm wrestling, including specialists, long snappers?
I'm kind of a long lever guy. I'm a long lever guy, so I don't think that helps me out. I don't know, like you want to say like the number 6, like over under 6 guys could beat arm wrestling. I would probably say under.
Yeah, I'd probably say under too.
Yeah, I was trying to give myself a little
six seemed a little high. But I feel like there's somebody on that team you could beat in arm wrestling. Yeah, it's hard to say right now. I would say you're no doubt about Landon Dickerson, and that was something we had heard during the chase when the whole talk about him being in the transfer portal. Talking to some people around the program, they're like, man, this is crazy because he's been great in the offseason conditioning stuff. He's been great in the chase, and he looks it. I mean, he definitely looks the part. He's not doing a whole lot right now because his ankle still apparently isn't 100%. It's very heavily taped, but he looks great. The most impressive physically to me that I've seen had been, Robert Cooper and Marvin Wilson and, Corey Durden, those guys. I mean, well, and also, I think Bavion and then the Dante Lucas, those guys are all like, they look like grown men linemen. They look like they could play just about anywhere on the line of scrimmage. It's hard to say overall, though. Some of the guys that gained weight, like Jawan Williams, some of those guys that gained 10 pounds here or there, they've put on some weight, but, I mean, they still have a way to go. I mean, Jalen Goss is really thin. I mean, there's just a lot of guys that it's not going to be an overnight process by any stretch.
Brian Sape 23's got jokes. Since the media coverage for spring football will be limited, is there any chance we get the 40-yard dash times for the War Chant staff, similar to what Rich Eisen does for the NFL Network?
Yeah, I mean, if you and Corey want to do that, it's an option. Maybe Michael will get out there.
What's the story? Was it you and I?
Oh my God,
you bet Corey about the 40-yard dash at Leon High at like midnight one night or something?
It was like 3 a.m. I'll try to tell it as quickly as possible. Yeah, Corey was convinced he could run a sub 540. And I said, and at the time, Rodney Hudson was FSU's lineman. And I said, dude, I don't think you could beat Rodney Hudson in the 40. And you would have thought I insulted his parents. I mean, he was so mad. It was over beers at a local establishment at about 1 a.m. And so then it just went from there. And then he got so mad that we ended up going to Leon High's track. We basically broke in at 2 a.m. and timed him run the 40. It was like me, Jim Lamar, a couple other people, and Corey, he's running the 40. We're timing him on our cell phones in the dark, and he ran like 5.2, 5.1, 5, and so I was killing him. I was so excited. Well, I go home, go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and I've got texts from him at like 4:30 in the morning, just basically calling me every name in the book because that track was in meters. And so if you convert those times, 40 meters to 40 yards, he actually ran like a 4.8 or 4.8 and change. And he's telling me to suck it, basically. Anyway, so we ended up rerunning it again at Doak the next day. And he probably was under 5. He was probably under 5. So he won that bet. But that was a good 10 years ago. I don't think he's running under 5, and I'm certainly not putting my time up there. I'm not sure I can run 40 yards.
Next question. This one now. This is from Rully for FSU. Ira, how are the newest linebacker recruits looking out there? I'm excited to see if Jaleel McCray can make an early impact. Also, why is Dontavius running with the twos? I think you mentioned that already, Ira. I know it's early, but that caught my attention. Thank you.
What have you thought of Jaleel? I mean, I think he's a big dude.
He looks a little too big for me. I know that's like the whole big thing. Everyone thought that Florida State was really undersized at linebacker. I think for some reason, DeKalen Brooks sort of became the spokesman or the spokes body for the linebacking core, and everyone's like, "We're just too darn small there. You know, we're never going to be able to do anything." I think Dontavius Jackson's a good enough size guy. Leonard Warner's got good size on him. Emmett Rice to a certain degree, at least he's got the size speed combo you want. Jaleel McCray's a departure from all that.
He's a big dude.
He's big. Not to say that he can't maybe he's got something that he can move in a little bit better, but they're not wearing pads. They're not tackling. So it's kind of tough to tell. And I'm following the ball when it comes to 11-on-11 stuff. But I mean, he's one of those kids that seems to have the right attitude, wants to be part of the reason why this program gets turned around. So I'm not counting that kid out, but I'm curious to see if someone at 240, 250 can play linebacker. You know, I haven't seen one of those in Florida State in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's probably going to have to drop some weight. But it wasn't just Kalen. It was a combination of Kalen and then Jaden, who's kind of a converted safety. And then, and then you throw an Emmett Rice out there as undersized. But they do, again, they go, what I said earlier, they do have a lot of options. I mean, right now, the third team linebackers, you got like Mari Gaynor's out there. Josh Brown is a guy that started games in his career at Florida State. He's out there on the third team. I mean, they've got, a lot of options. And then you've got these young guys coming in. So I feel better about that position. But you're right. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to how do they play, how they fit runs, how they do their job. And it's too early to know that.
All right, we got 2 more questions, I think, and maybe 1 comment. Let's go to this one here. It comes from NoelFan82. Handicap the choice for next baseball coach, meat or the field, and what names may emerge?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, some people think it's a slam dunk. It's going to be meat, Mike Martin Jr., no question. Some people will say, no, hold on. There's a lot of people that don't support that, and they want it to move out of the family. At this point, I would say it's probably going to be meat. I mean, the way they've set up this search to be done right now during a season, really it eliminates. I mean, and David Coburn said they're not going to require coaches to formally apply. They'll do it. The problem during a season is no college baseball coach who's currently got a team is going to want to formally apply for a job at even Florida State and let people in their school know that they've applied for another job. So doing it at this time of year. And they've got some reasons why they want to do it now, but I think it's going to be limiting the number of college coaches who can apply. So now you're looking at there's a junior college guy, the guy at Chipola, who everybody loves and respects. He's a guy that everybody wants him. So he's a guy I would assume will apply. And then there's some pro guys that that played at Florida State, Doug Mikiewicz, and some guys like that who their names are floated around. And I think they'd be interested. But right now, I'm going to say, especially based on when they did the search and everything, it looks more and more like it's going to be Mike Martin Jr. And I'm fine with that. I mean, if his name was anything else, nobody would have a problem. If his name was Steve Smith, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it. I think he's a good coach. And the bottom line is, if he doesn't do well, it's not like he's going to get a lifetime contract. It's going to, if he doesn't do well in 2 or 3 years, they'll be having another coaching search. But I like Mike Martin Jr., and I think he'll do a good job.
Yep. I've mentioned it. We talked about it on Wake Up War Chant. Download the podcast. If you're not a member of warchant.com, use the promo code FSU Spring 2019 to get 6 free months, or 6 bonus months rather, and a $50 gift code card to Garnet and Gold. And again, listen to the podcast. Corey Clark and I share our thoughts on that stuff too. But I agree. It's hard to imagine it won't be Mike Martin Jr. Harley 07, we'll just read it because I want to let them know that we recognize them, Ira. Florida State softball, what is our best start previous to this year? I don't know. I'll speak for the family on that one, but it's amazing because we thought when they were going to lose Jesse Warren, arguably the best hitter in program history, they're going to take a step back, but they haven't, and that's props to Coach Lonnie Alameda and what she's able to do and the culture she's created. And then football, they want to talk about linebackers again. The first and the 1 and 2 deep seems to be a bit of an odd mix. What are your thoughts? Ira already kind of touched on that, so we're good on that. And let's land the plane. Here we go. Last question, Ira, comes from Scotty Wood. Or also, Bimini Bound says a shout out. He's watching us live from Mexico. He's at Epcot while my wife is in an hour-long line to meet Elsa with my daughter. Started in the United Kingdom, if that tells you anything. A lot of orange and blue showing up out of nowhere. Crazy. All right, Scotty Wood asks, though not likely, is it possible for FSU to get a 3 seed come tournament time? Would it take winning the ACC?
Yeah, I think they'd have to win the ACC tournament. And even that, I'm not even 100% sure because I don't feel like the conference tournaments are really valued as much as people think. I think a lot of times the committee kind of already knows. They meet before that weekend, and I think they already kind of know what they're going to do. I don't see Florida State getting to a 3 seed, but if they did win the ACC tournament and they'd probably have to beat Carolina and Duke back to back, then yeah, maybe. But other than that, I don't see it happening. I think they're going to be if they're a 4 seed though, that's awesome. 4 or 5.
Yeah, we'll take it. Hopefully in Jacksonville. Hopefully not Hartford or San Jose or wherever Jerry Palm and Joe Lenardi have us going right now. So hopefully not. All right, that's it, man. We made it, Ira. The maiden voyage went off pretty well, I would think. Again, folks, use the promo code FSU Spring 2019 if you're not a member of WarChant.com. And if your membership lapsed, you can use that promo code and get some goodies. But if you're a new subscriber, you'll get 6 bonus months and that $50 gift card, and you'll get all the insight that Ira said. And you won't have to wait through a 60-minute video. You can read all of his great insight, Corey Clark's columns, Michael Langston's recruiting nuggets, as well as Gene Williams' War Room scoop. So join the fam. Ira, thanks for it, man. We appreciate your time, bud.
Thanks, Aslan. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody.